Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill, got a video for today, and this is a commentary I've been procrastinating for a while. I mean, even completing round 30 was something I procrastinated for a while. When SM first released on live server, I was on summer vacation, as some of you may know. When I came back, but like 2.5 weeks later, even like a week went by, almost 2 weeks went by, and I hadn't really even touched SM or even thought about it. Most people that I play with had moved on to other games like Destiny 2 and other things just because survival mode was the absolute disappointment that it was, which we'll touch on in this video. And then they'd all completed it within like a few hours, so there wasn't any point, there wasn't anything else to do. So I found myself not wanting to even run SM, but I mean I had to. So ended up doing like LFG groups 1 through 19. 19, 20 seemed to be like the LFG cutoff in terms of like difficulty. So then on that, I had a league called Federation make some groups for me, which is thanks to them, we got it done. I mean, I don't even think, did anyone die? Maybe there's like one death in this video. I don't know. Even round 30 itself is even like hard to die unless you're a tank. Unless you're a tank, like maybe picking like the bot exploding when like the water golems come out on Mara. I mean, there's a few instances where a tank technically could die, but other than that, I mean, there's really no reason or any chances for any group members to die in this fight, and mostly SM in general. So this commentary, I don't want it to be kind of all over the place. There's a lot of things I wanted to cover. In terms of why I think SM is dead, my rationalization for that, as well as some other points. So I think it's best to kind of do this like chronologically. So let's start from the very beginning. So survival mode season 1 and season 2 had its faults, but the difficulty was still there. So I mean, yeah, you had lunge spamming. That was a huge part of season 1, lunge spam, and then you had like the roll dodge with man-bat trinket. So that kind of left a mark on season 1. Season 2 was more like the difficulty was there, but like it was gray range tanking, and then you had like ice bolt. Like it basically you're using abilities to taunt, like being gray range the entire time, like snowball tanking on Zeus, and then you had the Zeus statues bugging out when you'd used a pull on them or the lasso artifact. So the season 1, season 2 by no means were perfect. But the difficulty was there. I mean, it's still a decently hard SM. I mean, as hard as 4-man can be. Because the problem with 4-man is that it restricts the setups entirely. I mean, you're going to have like 2 tanks, you're going to have a healer and like a battle troll. I mean, that's it. I mean, that's really all you can do. Sometimes you can get away with 1 tank, sometimes you can get away, but largely you can't. So 4-man is super restrictive. I mean, the whole point of it was that it was basically being easier to form groups because you'll need 4 people instead of 8. So I understood that concept. I personally prefer the 8-man SMs, but I understood why they wanted to try 4, and I think it was still, by their numbers, still successful. I mean, there was tons of survival mode rewards. They sold the currency on the marketplace, so I mean, I'm sure they made their money out of survival mode, especially with people farming like the particular base items, and in particular like the abyssal horn, stuff like that. So there was enough replay badges. I mean, yeah, there's speed hackers rampant throughout the time, but I mean, that's going to be the par for the course of this game, and the developers refusing to do anything about speed hackers. But I mean, that's a completely different topic. So season 3 was inevitable. They wanted to do it. My feedback at the start of it was that it cannot be the same. I mean, we can't have season 1, season 2, and season 3 all be the same rounds, except like the 2 special ones like 5 and 10. I mean, it's way too tedious. It's already going to be in the same room because, I mean, all the assets are set up and everything else. So it's always going to be this training simulator just because it's easy. There's plenty of other rooms, like there's plenty of opportunities for them to use other different rooms, like the Coliseum from Gods and Monsters is a perfect example. It's a perfect size SM room. I mean, it's even like a Coliseum, or they could rehash some of the older maps, like so the whole point around my feedback was that so many of these players weren't around for the survival modes in season, like in 2014, 2015, 2016, and I think FOSS in 2017. So they don't know those maps, they don't know those bosses, and largely the survival mode bosses, besides like the Superman related ones, never came back in the game. So I thought it was a perfect opportunity to bring those bosses back and put them in this survival mode. So I'd been talking to Sharon, giving feedback to him in terms of bosses, and I was hoping that like his boss, like Mazo, that he created could come in, because I mean, Vampire Lord was one of the best. Well, besides Vampire Lord being on the villain side, where he could close the pools with the consumables, but I mean that kind of defeated the purpose. But I mean, Vampire Lord itself is a very good SM boss in terms of being 4-man, because you have those his shadows that he spawns, and it's very difficult round. I mean, if that round would have been like 28, 29 instead of 25, I mean, that would gatekeep a lot of people. So I've been talking, saying, hey, you know, do a Mazo, do your theme, because they're always going to have theme bosses, like I said, on 5 and 10. So I knew they were going to have some kind of theme for that. So I knew those bosses are going to be chosen by them. But the other bosses I want to be from other rounds. So then it was talking about, okay, which ones work best. So then we had talks about like Vice and Krona, and Metallo came a little bit later. Like Suthor always came back. Baron Some Savage, I wouldn't agree, but he came back because he was easy. I mean, Kara Ferris was good and passionate. Like Catwoman was always good. So trying to bring back some of those iconic ones. I mean, in the end, I gave him a whole list, and a lot of the bosses were chosen were from OA, which I mean is fine. I mean, OA SM was good, but it was something that was still an experiment, because you're bringing these bosses from CR scaled SMs to now stats revamp basically. So I knew there was going to be fine tuning in the beginning. I had no idea exactly if they're going to be like the best combinations. Like when Test Server first came out, it was Vice and Krona, which I mean theoretically like Krona was an SM boss, and now you're putting it with another one like Vice, which is basically an issue because of his suck and pull, his constantly having to kite. So I knew there could be some kind of possibilities where those combinations didn't work or just didn't work out, like having like Carol and Catwoman, even though Carol and Catwoman work in OA, not necessarily they'll work in Training Simulator. So I knew there's going to be some growing pains with that. That's what Test Server is for. But what happened was when everything released on Test Server, the health pools were crazy. And now a big thing about this whole survival mode is that Milbarge is the developer that had been doing survival mode for years. He did season 1, season 2. So now it was Kotoxic that basically had taken over that. So he was basically saying, okay, here's Milbarge's SM, run with it kind of thing. So when the health pools came out and they were completely out of whack, the unfortunate thing is the feedback that was given, and I mean any player that was actually on Test Server running survival mode with me and other groups knew the health pools were ridiculous. I mean, we were completing round 1 before my Ice Elemental Supercharge even finished. So that means we were killing like Deathstroke and Baron Savage like within 20 seconds. Like that's I mean, you can't have an SM round last 20 seconds. That's ridiculous. So when I said buff the health, everyone's thinking, oh, Obsidian Chill's this huge elitist and he just wants to gatekeep SM for everyone. It's like, no, this is actual feedback because the health pools are ridiculously undertuned. So then that basically ruined feedback for a while because everyone's freaking out in the forums that Obsidian wants to make everything harder, even though that's legitimate feedback because those players had nothing to do with Test Server. They were just thinking that I was trying to make it harder. So, I mean, that wasted like 3 or 4 days worth of feedback just going back and forth with that. And then we had the rounds like Vice and Krona not working, and then there's all the eventual bugs. So there was a lot of testing being done with survival mode. And I mean, any people that ran with me in my groups, SM on Test Server was legitimately a decent challenge. Was it super hard? No. It was probably on par with Season 2. And then difficulty-wise and being at the same time interesting because it was new bosses, so new mechanics people had to deal with. Even though that the mechanics didn't always translate well. Like, I mean, basically, Vice, you just run around. Krona was basically a little bit nerfed too hard. But on Test Server, you had his points basically coming all the time in one-shots everywhere. So that's where my issue came. So there was a huge breakdown in terms of feedback from survival mode on Test Server to survival mode on live. So it worked well on test. Then there was some last minute balancing because, like I said before, there's a lot of fine tuning on Test Server. Some balancing was done at the end, and then all of a sudden when it released on live, survival mode is like a complete joke. So something happened at the end, didn't translate well. I have no idea. There was a hotfix right before SM released. I think something happened to the health pools there or the difficulty. Because I mean, when I was going through on Test Server, I mean, the bosses had like, it was like, the people that I ran tests with, because I ran the numbers, they were like basically like 200 or 300 mil health per boss. And like the big single ones like Krona and Superman had like 600 mil health. So I mean, the rounds were set to take like, 20, 30 minutes, an actual lot of difficulty. And then when released on live server, all the health pools are tiny and everything's easy. Nothing kills you. I mean, block breakers were hitting you for like maybe 200-300k health, where there was no one shots. The only one-shots were like the obvious mechanics when you don't block like Baron Savage, Skull, and everything else. Like those are basically going to be scripted anyway. So then basically the developers don't want to change it after the fact, or they reported nothing was wrong, or they're investigating it, and by that time everyone already completed SM. So the whole feedback in terms of making it more difficult, the developer said they were looking into it and then never actioned it. And then basically I think maybe like a week and a half in, Meps was basically on the forum saying, no, we're not going to change it, everything's going to stay the same. So that's why I'm saying survival mode is dead. Survival mode as we know it is dead. It's never going to return. It never should return. They've basically killed it with Season 3. Now, that doesn't mean that the survival mode concept is dead. I mean, if they want to rebrand it, because the whole point was like, even on the developer's own words on the website, is that survival mode is the hardest content that DC ever puts out, and basically everyone has to work together to be able to complete it, in terms of like needing max gear and everything else. This survival mode is not harder than any elite raids. The source wall, like I'm not even talking about elite plus. Like compare round 30 to like the 6 dimensional elite, the source wall elite, fractured godsphere elite. I mean those elite raids are way, even QE, like convergence and the making elite. QE was actually harder than survival mode. I mean and people like QE was like a comp raid. So it's just that survival mode's difficulty tuning was ridiculously low. Like, I mean, it doesn't even deserve to be called survival mode. It was basically easier than elite raids. And elite plus is infinitely harder than survival mode. So the problem with that is that everyone else, like the casual gaming DC, the developers, everyone, they loved Season 3. Season 3 was a huge success. I mean, look how many people completed it. Compared to other years. I mean, you didn't even really, yeah, speed hacking was a huge thing and advertised daily in chat, even though the developers did nothing. But I mean, largely, you didn't even have to speed hack survival mode to be able to complete it because it was so easy. I mean, pugs were doing it. So you have a survival mode that like easy people can farm, everyone can get their completion. I mean, because the art team was like, there was no art team, like we didn't even have a crown. I mean, not that I wear the survival mode Season 1 or Season 2 crown just because of like speed hacking. It doesn't really feel like an accomplishment. It's just an item. But I mean, the Zeus lightning bolt back was nice. So this year we have a material that like looks weird. I mean, we've got some crappy chrome accessories, spheres for 25. So the survival mode rewards this year were awful. I mean, one of the trinkets, the 6-dimensional drone looks okay. I mean, it looks unique in terms of its model compared to others, but largely the rewards this year were just awful, which I understood because there's no art team. But at the same time, to not even have like an extra reward for around 30, like a crown, is pretty crazy. Because I mean, you could just like reskin a crown. Like I said, it doesn't really matter to me because I don't wear it, but a lot of people do. So I mean, not having a crown for Season 3, even though it's ridiculously easy, that was unacceptable. So kind of going back into what I'm saying, the concept of survival mode is still successful. They just need to rebrand it, name it something else, but it can't be called survival mode anymore because it's just going to be, there's no way we can go back to like say Season 4 and make it harder because everyone's just going to be wanting to base it off Season 3, which was easy and saw tons of completions and probably tons of resets and everything else. So DC's looking at it from like a completionist perspective, saying like, oh, there's a lot of player retention, a lot of people ran it, a lot of people completed it. So they're saying, oh, by the numbers, Season 3s were super successful. But that's not how you can look at survival mode. I mean, think about survival mode from 2014 to 2017. There's only three groups in all of history that completed survival mode. There's 2 that completed it non-CR scaled. One Piece and Pony Slay Station. They completed FOSS. That was 2014? 2015? 2014? I think 2014 was just OA. I'm a little fuzzy on the year, but it was either 2014 or 2015, but it wasn't CR scaled. And then when CR scaling came out for survival mode, there was only one league, and that was Legacy, with a couple of members of Last Laugh. We were the only 8 people out of 3 years completed a CR scaled SM. The whole point of SM was to make it restrictive, to make it like that end game challenge. And then nowadays we're seeing like hundreds, thousands of completions. I mean, Season 3, whoever queued up around 30 beat it. I mean, even round 2, season 2 was really easy with that effigy bug. I mean, season 1 was super easy with just lunge spamming, you couldn't die. So, I mean, the whole concept of survival mode, it's not about like being elitist or gatekeeping. It's that survival mode was supposed to be the most difficult challenge that DC has ever created, and it was up until kind of this point. So, I mean, you could still, like, elite raids are still easier than survival mode season 1 and season 2, even with the faults. I mean, there's still plenty of times. It was just the tanks couldn't die, but there's still difficult rounds. But season 3 basically wrecked that. And now they're going to base everything going off season 3 because of how successful it was. And then now it's basically, to me, there's no point in bringing it back. I mean, if they want to have some kind of like survival challenge, or maybe call it like the gauntlet or something like that, by all means. But it can't be called survival mode because it basically now it shares no similarities as it did in the past. So here's season 3 completed. I know people have probably watched hundreds and dozens of footage already of this before. I mean, everyone uploaded the first day. This is how I feel in survival mode. So take care. We'll see you in the next video.